All right, Paul, it's the moment we've been waiting for. This is when we dig into what are unproductive interactions.
So one of the things that Allison and I talk a lot with managers and leaders and just folks generally about is this idea of how can we help create more productive interactions? And
Mhm.
we realize that that's just such a thing for us that we occasionally forget to talk about. Well, what's the problem we're actually trying to solve here? Like, what are the unproductive interactions that we're trying to help people with? Because people may not realize that the things that they're doing are unintentionally unproductive. And so we wanted to explore that a little bit here.
Exactly, exactly. And you hit on it. It's the unintentional unproductive. It's the things that you go about in your daily life that seem pretty nonchalant, like no big deal, but it's actually contributing to a working relationship that's not going to help you as much as you would like going forward.
hmm hmm Yeah. So some examples, and we've been kind of thinking and working a lot in the manager space here recently because managers have a lot of interactions, and so when their interactions are not as productive as they could be, that has a big impact.
Mhm.
So I think one of the places that that comes up for a lot of managers that we hear about this a lot is in their one-to-ones with their direct reports. That
Mhm.
these can be unproductive in a variety of different ways.
Yeah, I think we've heard a number of times well, what if I'm trying to ask them questions and I'm getting really short answers? It's like they don't really want to open up. They don't really have a whole lot to tell me. uh,
hmm
Super common, right? That you're trying to focus on the work, you're getting just enough information to get by, but you're probably not learning more about where they want to go in their career, where they're struggling, like what's causing some slowdown in their work, that you might be able to identify patterns that you start to hear across the team, that you would see, there's a bigger opportunity here for me as a manager to propose a solution and try and reduce that drag that everyone's experiencing.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things we know that effective managers do is they find the overlap between the things that their direct reports are really interested in, that they're excited about, the places that they want to grow, and also the things that the organization needs, like what they're trying to do. I had a manager who was really good at this for a number of years. And the thing is that if you're not actually having the interactions in those one-on-ones that are giving you the information, then you can't do that very well. If you don't know, this is what this person loves to do, this is what they hate doing, this is what they're really good at and hate doing, those kinds of things. And at the same time, you also need to be making sure that it's not just future focused, that you're not just getting information about the other person, right? You also need to make sure that the information that you need, the decisions you need to have happening on a regular basis to get the thing in front of you done, that's happening too, but it's happening in a way that builds the relationship, that allows you to be more productive as you work together in the future.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's why the way that you show up as a manager, the things that you're doing, that you're saying have such a big impact on that rapport, on that working relationship with your direct.
hmm
uh, Paul and I, we've been talking about how your one-on-ones probably don't look the same for every single person on your team because they're all different. So even though you're the same, like you're the constant throughout all of those separate meetings, you want to adapt to their needs. And we already have a comment from someone on LinkedIn saying that self-awareness is generally one of our weakest skills. Absolutely. Which is why also in those one-on-one conversations, we want to be checking in with the other person to find out what's working for them, or as we're adapting and we're changing our behaviors, how is that experience for them? Do they see the change? Is it working out the way that we hope? Being able to check in, find out, is this a good relationship? Is this productive? Is this getting us the results that we're looking for or not? Is really helpful.
I think another place that unproductive interactions often shows up is when we're communicating information about what's going on in the organization. Often this is a change, right? As
Mhm.
as managers, we're often called on to be sustaining sponsors in change, where it's like we're not the ones making the decision about what's happening, about this direction we're going, but we need to actually bring about, we need to help create alignment around it. We need to help deal with people's reactions to this change. And so sometimes that unproductive interaction shows up in the way that we're trying to communicate that, where we either gloss over like what the other person's reaction to it is, or
Mhm.
we don't even realize that we're not giving them any room to have any input into how are we going to work through this. Like, this change is happening, we are moving on to this new project, but on the other hand, the way that we do that may be open to a lot of different ways of handling it well. And quite frankly, a lot of what managers need to do is be able to take sort of larger global changes and make sure that they're adapted well to their specific environment, to their specific team. So it's not just about making sure your one-on-ones are adapted to the
Mhm.
people that you're having them with. It's about making sure, hey, that the people who I'm working with are rolling this change out in a way that makes sense for our context. So there's that adaptability as well. And if you're not listening for the kinds of things that your people are bringing up as you're communicating this change to them, then you're missing an opportunity to do that.
I totally agree. I think that's also why when we look at one-on-ones and we say we want to build rapport, we want to have this easy flow back and forth between manager and direct, that people often start going into the personal life,
Hmm.
right? I want to get to know you as a human. And that human stuff probably does not help us for those moments of change. There is an initiative. I need you on board. I need to know where your reaction is. And it probably takes more than 30 seconds to get on board with something like we're changing project direction or changing projects entirely. But you've got to allow for that space, and you've got to allow for that person to be heard and to be able to support them throughout that entire change curve, that adoption curve.
Hmm.
I love this comment from David Russell. I'm going to show it real quick. Managers who believe that building rapport and building trust are unproductive need to reset their perspectives.
Hmm.
I think we could both see there's truth in that. But again, there's more to building rapport than connecting on a personal level.
Hmm.
Building the rapport through the work is extremely important, and not something we talk about all that often.
Hmm. And that's actually like a key to sort of our approach to a lot of this, is the idea that it is through the work that we build the rapport, that we build the relationship, that we're actually approaching those interactions in a way that improves the way we work together. That
Mhm.
it's not a, and we see, you see this all the time in the, now we have the relationship building part of the interaction, where I'm going to ask you how your weekend was,
Yep.
like, I'm going to ask you about your pets or your this, that, the other thing, and we're going to have small talk. And now we're going to get down to business. Allison and I both have kind of a mutual dislike for what we kind of call fluffy icebreakers.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Instead, what we find really useful is to engage with people around the work, around whatever it is that it's at hand, but in a way that doesn't ignore their humanness, like their perspective on it. So asking for people's opinions, how they feel about stuff, what do they think about things, engaging with them as whole human beings around the task at hand and the work at hand, is a way that actually builds relationship and builds rapport, and is focused on being productive, on getting the things that you need to get done. So I think one of the places we see an unproductive interaction is this idea that it's one or the other, that we're either building the relationship or we're doing the work, when in fact it's about how do we do the work in a way that builds the relationship.
Exactly. Well, and I love that you referred to the fluffy icebreakers, because you and I like to joke. That's the moment where we ask about one another's cats.
Hmm.
How are your cats doing? How are my cats doing? They're very fluffy.
Yes.
Uh, and does that help us collaborate? Not really.
Hmm.
not when it comes time for us to support one another in how we're working with our clients, how we're building out materials together. It sometimes might be the way that we're taking a big step back, and it's just be like, hey, can we talk about anything else? And to create that diversion can make it difficult for us to come back
Mhm,
into the work
mhm.
sometimes.
Well,
I,
and
yeah, no, go for
going back
it.
to like something we said at the beginning, which is it's it's unintentional. Like
Mm,
it's well intentioned there. Like as David kind of pointed out, some people are just like, we don't need to build rapport or relationship, blah blah blah, right? And it's like, well, we don't believe in that, right? We think that's
mhm,
problematic. But also then we have people who know, oh, I need to build relationship, but they're not doing it in a way that's actually productive, that it's useful.
right.
And so it's well intentioned, it's just not actually having the effect that you want. And so that's like, I just kind of want to point to that. And most of these unproductive interactions that we see, right? We work with a lot of managers, and having been a manager, myself, it is often a lonely job. Like our culture does not celebrate managers. In
That's
fact,
an understatement. We tend to like create villains of managers, right? This like archetype. Think about like Dilbert in particular, the pointy-haired boss, right? Like somehow you have become a manager, and we assume that you've become dumber and smarter at the same time.
right.
But somehow you like know better than the rest of us, but you're going to be kind of a moron in what you go about doing and how you do it.
Yeah. Yeah, and so the way that we talk about management doesn't do people a lot of favors, right? It can be a kind of lonely job, and we often, in a lot of organizations, managers really are under supported to do these kinds of things well. And so we recognize that like people are struggling with some of these things. So we did kind of want to talk about like, so what do you do? Like,
Right.
how do you, when you notice that if you're a manager and you're having these unproductive interactions, or they're not as productive as you would like them to be, you're seeing yourself in some of these stories that we're telling, or you're having an interaction with your manager, because interactions require more than one person. Like, there's a part for you in there too.
Mhm.
Sort of what we want to think about. So there's a thing that Allison and I use as kind of a gauge. And it's a thing we call the 3 C's. And those C's are clear, curious, and connected. Because one of the things that we see in those productive interactions are ones where we're being clear about what we think, what we feel, what we want, and what we're going for here. And the other person is clearly receiving that. They're understanding our point of view and our perspective. And we're also curious in that we're wanting to know, and we're getting a sense of what is the other person thinking and feeling and wanting, needing. What are their ideas? What's their perspective? What's going on? And we're doing that in a way that's creating a sense of connection between us, that we are actually kind of in this together. And it's very often when we notice that an interaction has turned unproductive, it's because at least one of those is missing. So we tend to use those 3 C's as a way of gauging how are we doing. It's a leading indicator of whether or not this interaction is productive. Or sometimes looking back on it and going, why did that go so badly? Oh,
That that is the I guess benefit of us being consultants, right? We get to work with so many different clients that we are hearing those patterns of like what has not been working, that we're able to see these elements, these 3 C's are the piece to focus on. So I know for me, when I have those moments like, oh, I am super clear, I am brutally direct. It actually is me coming at it as there is no room for question, because I think I have spelled it out just enough in just the perfect way that it will download itself into your brain. You're on board and you're ready to go take the action. Um, and those moments of I can't even rephrase it because I have got locked in on the clarity. It is just like this. Don't need to like look anywhere else, or like come up with other what ifs. That's the sign I'm actually very rigid in my stance, and
mhm,
that's why Paul said we need the curiosity. We also need the connectedness.
Hmm.
Because to be in the clear and only in the clear can be very difficult. I also love there's a quote shared here in the chat from Seth Godin that you can't be curious and angry at the same time.
Hmm.
Again, for me, if you're really firm and clear and missing the other pieces, you might come across as angry. What I need from you is this. Just do this. You have one job now. It is this. And that can be very intense on the receiving side
Hmm.
and squash the questions and the brilliant ideas that your team members might have.
And my failure mode often is on the other side of that, which is that my sort of natural curiosity and then my trained curiosity, as a coach, turns itself on, and people don't know where I stand. Right? I'm
Mm,
asking all these questions, and I can be super vague about like, well, what's my perspective? Like, where do I come from? But it can also be disruptive to the sense of connection because it can sound like it's the Spanish Inquisition, right? I'm just like, well, what do you think about this? Why do you think that? What's going on here? What about? It's just like nothing but, and I really want to know. Like I'm
mhm.
genuinely curious, but I'm not approaching that interaction in a way that is creating a sense of connection. That it can actually be very disconnecting. It's interesting because we you can be clear and you can be curious, but you still might not do it in a way that creates a sense of connection between the two of you. And
Yeah.
so you have to approach it. You have to be, and that's why we kind of try to think about, this is three things you got to do all at the same time, which is not easy, right? It's a thing that you can think about and you can intellectually understand that I need to do this, but it also takes a lot of practice to actually do it well.
Agreed, agreed. And that practice, I have found you could wait until the, oh my gosh, I'm about to like have that meeting, I'm about to have that conversation. Let me find a trusted peer and try to like role play it, like the day before I need to go have it live. The best thing to do is start practicing it now, build up these muscles so that when you need them, they're already built up.
Hmm.
We have a class coming up in December. It's the Managing Amazing People course. This is the opportunity to learn more about the three C's and be able to practice in a very low stakes environment some of those higher stakes conversations that you might have as a people manager.
Hmm. And the practice piece is important uh, because when you're in a difficult conversation, right? When you're having a conversation with, someone who's underperforming, who needs to be doing something different, or they may not have a job 6 months from now, 3 months from now, whatever it is, like that's not a time to have messy form, right? You're already in that place where you're probably a little worked up about this, right?
Mhm.
If you're not a little anxious about it, there may be something wrong. But if you're going, well, now's the time that I need to learn this skill, it's too late. And so it's one of the things we actually circling back around to one-on-ones, something we talked about at the beginning. One of the things that we talk about is the idea that your one-on-ones can be a really great opportunity to practice these things in a lower stakes environment, but also as you're having more productive interactions, as you're being clear and curious and connected, you can start to push the envelope. So
Mhm.
there's that idea of not only are your one-on-ones different with each of your different reports, but they probably shouldn't stay the same with each individual person over time, because when we're really talking about having productive interactions, we're talking about two things. We're talking about getting whatever the task at hand is done. So if it's the information gets exchanged, if it's the decision gets made, the problem gets explored, the solution gets worked out, that's sort of the task at hand. That needs to be happening. And when it's a productive interaction, it's something where we're doing that in a way that makes us more capable of doing that work and that even harder versions of that work in the future.
Mhm.
So if that's not happening, right? If we're just getting the work done, but in some cases we're actually making it harder for us to work together in the future, right? We're building up residue is one of the terms that I've heard to describe
Mhm.
this, where it's like it actually is harder. We're creating and accumulating baggage. like those interactions are not productive either, even if we're getting the work done. So
Mhm.
we really kind of hold that, and the idea is that if we're having these more often, if we're showing up as clear and curious and connected in all of our interactions, then it actually makes the way that we work together easier. We get better at it. We're able to leverage the relationship that we're building to do harder and harder work.
I totally agree. I think about the one-on-ones that I've been in where it felt like my manager just wanted to hear positive news, right? Just tell me like what's working, tell me what you're loving and what you're enjoying. And that did build connection and it was within the context of the work. It left things kind of up in the air though for those times I needed to share what's not working, like what I'm not enjoying,
Mm,
difficult news. So being able to create some space, create the relationship so that it can handle all of that is super important. And I think we tend to recognize it mostly when we're dealing with our own boss. Uh,
mhm,
how your manager is communicating with you, how you two are interacting. Because oftentimes, people managers, this is the first time you're in a role that the work gets done through other people. And you start to realize, I'm not sure what my boss thinks of me. I don't know if they think I'm effective or not, or what areas I need to improve in and I feel self-conscious about telling them where I'm not so sure what to do.
yeah, and it's great, like, when you actually have that, those types of interactions, when you've got that relationship, like, you can really push the envelope. I remember in one annual review with a best manager I'll ever have, right?
Mhm.
He was giving me all this really positive stuff. You've done this, the other thing, and I literally said to him, "That's great. What do I need to work on?" Right? And he heard that and he stopped. And I mean, this was 15 years ago, and I still remember sitting in his office when he said this. He said, "You need to have more than one speed." And it was true, like that but we'd never had that conversation like about that. But there was something about all the interactions that we'd had leading up to that that made it so that I could ask that question and he could actually give me a clear answer. And it
Mhm.
was great. And then our further conversations just kind of built on that. And it really helped me grow and develop in a way that I'd never had that kind of relationship with a manager before. But it's only because he was able to tell me about I was able to ask about, and he was able to tell me about where I stood and what I could work on.
And that's what we want. We want managers to have more of that impact on their directs, to be able to give that piece of insight, that feedback that they so need, and that it does stick with them and shape where they go and what they're able to do from then on.
Mhm.
So if you want to learn more about the three C's, being clear, being connected, being curious, and practice those, join us for the Managing Amazing People class coming up in December. You can visit helpingimprove.com/map to find out more. Thank you so much for joining our live stream today.
Thanks, everybody.